what, 7 weeks are available for viewing on the website right now.
So right now there's a poll up, and it's relates to what your lake organization currently uses for communications.
Just will help me get a sense of who's on and what you're using. No wrong answers in that poll. So. All right, well, why don't I go ahead and get started? So welcome everybody.
You want me to share the poll results or not?
We can let it run for another little bit. I'll do a little intro and then we'll share. How's that?
Sounds good.
So welcome. My name is Mike Engleson. I'm the executive director of Wisconsin Lakes. We're the statewide nonprofit organization of lake associations and lake districts and stakeholders that care about our lakes and the waters of Wisconsin. We also are the host to a program called LakeKit.net, which provides low-cost websites to lake organizations in the state. And I'll get into that into a lot more detail in a little bit. If you're just joining us, if you have questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat box. As I go through different sections of the talk, there will be some time to answer a couple of questions in between them, and then we'll have time for more open discussion at the end. And we can probably cut the poll off if you want, Eric, and show the results. Just was trying to get a sense of what level of electronic communications you're already using in your organizations. And it seems like the vast majority of you are using some combination of everything, with some using just email. And as I said before, there's no real wrong answer to any of that. And we'll get into the different forms and what they mean shortly.
Did you want the second poll?
No, you don't have to do that one yet. I'll tell you when to go ahead and do that one.
Thank you.
Oops. There we go. So I wanted to start out the talk with a couple of caveats that I think are important for everyone to keep in mind while I'm going through the massive amount of detail and information about the different types of electronic communications and how to put them all together into work. And the first is that quality really does trump quantity. So it's very easy when you listen to these talks to come away thinking that, okay, I absolutely need to use all of these things and I need to be doing them at the highest level possible. And that's not necessarily true. It's very situationally dependent for your organization. And it's also very dependent on what you're capable of doing. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to spend a lot of time building a massive, huge website with lots of bells and whistles if nobody's going to use it, you don't really have the time to maintain it. So the most important thing I would say to come away from this is that whatever you choose to do electronically, make sure that you're doing it well before you move on to the next stage. And you can kind of plan things out and develop things. And the second caveat is to remember that if you build it, unless you're building a magical baseball field in Iowa, they actually might not come. If no one in your area, around your lake or in your association or district uses Facebook, and you build a great Facebook page, it doesn't mean that anybody's going to ever come see it. And that's an important consideration to make. So even as I talk about the importance of some of these things, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything's important to you. So let's take a step back first and think a little bit about how communication for organizations has evolved over time. Back in the 70s and the 80s, I remember back in the 70s, I remember helping my dad when I was a kid put together a newsletter for the organization that he was a part of on the kitchen counter. We'd collate all the pages that he got printed and staple them and fold them and put stamps on them and send them out. And that used to be the way that everything pretty much happened. Over the decades, we got into the situation where things got sent out by email. So some of those newsletter type things started to go through email communications. Then websites came along, which were pretty much just static pages. They didn't really change a whole lot. You slapped a bunch of information up about your lake, your association, whatever it might be, and it just kind of sat there. And over time, websites began to develop and became more dynamic and changed more often as it was easier to make edits and new tools were developed. And eventually those morphed into social media as we know it today, and we'll get into that towards the end. So all of these types of communication have standalone benefits of their own. There are reasons to do each of them on their own. But what I want to think about today is how, when using them in concert, you can actually make a bigger impact than if you just use them alone. So we're going to start with this diagram, and we'll come back to this after we go through each of the different topics. But you can see I've really broken things up into 4 different realms. There's a website, there's email. This generally means like email newsletter type vehicles, not necessarily emails between one person and another, though that's certainly a form of electronic communication internally for some organizations. But I'm really talking more about the things that you get 10 million of from different organizations and may or may not read. There's social media, the Facebook, the Twitters, and those sorts of things. And then there are still the non-electronic kind of communications, the paper newsletters, the fundraising mailings and things like that, signage that's posted at the landing and things like that. So all of those are important. The gold diamond in the middle is meant to represent the audience, so who you're trying to reach. I think that we often think as organizations about, okay, how is my website getting to this audience? And how is my email getting to this audience? What we often miss is the connective tissue around them. So how websites and email can be connected. And it really is sort of a web. You could have other strands going from the website to the non-electronic and social media to email that are all sort of funneling into that audience is the idea that I'm trying to get to. So we'll start with websites. Because I think a website is a good foundation. It's sort of the, as I said, it was the original electronic way of posting a bunch of information that was supposed to just sort of sit there and everybody was able to come get to it. There's lots of ways to organize them. They generally are searchable. They can be a repository for documents. So for instance, meeting minutes and other sorts of data. They can be accessible, and everybody is pretty used to them now, and you have a lot of control over content. The sort of evolution of websites went from that static approach that I was talking about to the more what we call posts. Posts are kind of are really anything that is a contained story that's meant to be posted up there. It may be something that is meant to last for a long time, but it's self-contained. It doesn't necessarily go out to anywhere else, and it's sort of the endpoint is the way I think of it, of the information that you're trying to get out. They can be updated. They're searchable. You can usually, on most website platforms, you can have them have labels attached to them so that people can search. If they come to your website and they're looking for information on aquatic invasive species, they could just search aquatic invasive species and find everything, every post that's been tagged with that, and they'll see all sorts of stuff. Again, a blog is the most common form of post communication, I guess. And as you see, as we get towards the end again, and back to that diagram, posts really, the way I conceive of it, they're the story. They're everything else kind of is a teaser that leads you, that can lead the audience into your website and to read that post. Then hopefully they spend some time on your website and get other information as well, or at least they've experienced that hub and know that it's there. You can almost think of it like the airline hub that all the connecting flights fly into one single airport that the airline uses as its hub, that's bigger and has more services. So this is probably, I think it seemed like a fair number of you probably have websites, so I think this is pretty clear, but just so that you have a sense of what a good website page would look like, you almost always have some sort of header that identifies what page you're on. That can be important because you want to have, if somebody comes to that page, if it's not the home page of the website, if they come to that page through a link, you want them to know where it is that they have arrived at, so that they do know that they're in the right place. Then there's some sort of space that has menu items that lets them easily navigate to other places in the website. That's obviously important because you want people to be able to find other things. So even if they've come in for to find some minutes, they might realize, oh, I know there's a weather widget on the home page. I can click on the home page and I'll see a little box that will show what the current temperature is at the lake, which is interesting because right now it's February and I'm in Arizona, and I'd like to see how much warmer it is here than it is at my lake cabin. Whatever content on the page is going to be here. And then there's, again, similar to the header, a footer, again, with just some more information, usually about the site. It might be a place where your web provider has placed who it is that has developed the site or something like that. But that's really as complicated as a website page needs to be. Within the main content, you can, build columns and place images and put in other little plugin things that will do lots of sorts of different things. But it's really a matter of just figuring out how to plop those things in. And the fortunate thing is that website editing has gotten so simple now. There are very simple editing programs. The basic WordPress editor does this. At LakeKit, we use an editor called Elementor that basically allows you'll have, when you're in the editor, if you want to place something on a page, you're able to pick, okay, I want to, you can set up a row right here, you pull an image in, and boom, that image just loads right in. There's no coding, there's no anything that you have to do that's complicated anymore. It's all pretty much just drag and drop and type. So I've been mentioning LakeKit.net, and someone asked exactly what LakeKit.net is. This is a program that was started by Larry Brzezina, who I believe is on the Zoom today with us. Larry was a lake leader, and this was his lake leader project to create a simple way for lake organizations to get websites. And so a few years ago, the number of sites and the speed at which the technology was getting updated was beginning to outstrip his single voluntary capabilities. And he came to us and said, hey, would you guys be interested in taking over the administration of this? So we did, Wisconsin Lakes did. Larry and several others, on the next slide, you'll see them, volunteer with us as a steering committee, and we have a paid technical service provider that does some of the back end stuff. So with LakeKit, it's a membership voluntary organization. It's a program of Wisconsin Lakes. You don't have to be a member of Wisconsin Lakes to be part of it, but you do get a little bit of a discount on the annual fee. The difference with this site, and I'll show you this in a different slide, sort of the how it's laid out, you're able to maintain your own URL. So your website name, even if you have an existing site that is, longlake.org, you'll still be able to be longlake.org when you come into LakeKit, or if you build a new LakeKit site, you'll be able to make yourself whatever domain name you want, so long as somebody else isn't using it. As I said, we have a technical administrator in Ken Justiniano from Northern Graphics Operations. And then the other nice thing is that every site, you're able to go in and edit your content and do whatever you need to do with your site. And you can establish as many users at different levels of use as you want. You can set different tasks that they're able to do, and you'll always have a single administrator that is sort of your designated webmaster, whoever it is that you want. Some sites, some organizations use a third-party professional as a web developer as their webmaster. Many just use volunteers within their organization, and we offer training to help out figure out how to do all of that you need to do. So we are a mostly volunteer community, as I've tried to indicate, where we all try to help each other out. So we have things like forum message boards within LakeKit.net that allow us to ask questions of each other when people have issues with their site or want a new thing. They can go to the forum, place a question on there. Other people will respond. Maybe that question has already been asked in the past, and they'll be able to find an answer there. And sort of the pinnacle of our volunteers, I want to thank our steering committee. So Larry and Karen Reynolds, Stan Smanuski, who I think everybody is on the call today. And then Ken is the only paid person from Northern Graphics Operations. We use WordPress. There are lots of different web platforms. They all have advantages and disadvantages. So there's, GoDaddy and Wix and many local proprietary systems that just have clients within a regional area or something like that a individual web developer has put together. But WordPress is a free open source content management system. It's very, very popular. There's lots and lots of plugins that have been developed for it by third parties. Like I said, the editor that we use is not the main WordPress editor. It's a different piece of software that is a little bit easier and more feature rich that we like to use. It's really, really simple. It works on laptops and desktops and mobile phones and tablets really well. So we recommend WordPress. There's not necessarily, that doesn't mean that if your site is on some other platform, that's a bad thing, but LakeKit just uses WordPress. Larry also set LakeKit up on WordPress because of a somewhat unique feature that it has. It allows us to create what we call a multi-site network. So all of the different lake organization sites are down here at the bottom of this tree. They're all part of LakeKit. But if you go to one of our member sites, you don't know that the public doesn't know that they're part of the LakeKit network, except for maybe it says it in the folder. Sorry. And the advantage of that they're all connected, is that all the backend stuff, so the updating of the plugins and the WordPress software itself, fixing any major problems that occur, backing everything up, all of that happens within the back end and is handled by one of us or by Ken at Northern Graphics. So you as a user don't have to do any of that. All you're doing is worrying about your content and how the site looks on public facing pages. That allows us to keep things at a lower cost. It takes less storage. It allows us to bring on new sites at a lower cost. We're able to offer both hosting and domain name registration. So normally you have to pay for like the physical computers, that the space in the physical computers that your website is stored on. And you also have to pay for the rights to use the name that you want to use. So wisconsinlakes.org is a domain name or a URL. You have to pay someone to be able to get that name registered. If you want, you're able to get one domain name registration through LakeKit.net. And as I said, we do all the backups. Our sites are secure, and our volunteers offer 2 to 3 hours of training for all new members to learn how to use the different facets of the editor and to get their content up there. You're working directly in the site that you're putting together. So you're crafting it as you learn. Most people have found that that's more than enough time, I think, to learn how to do stuff on their own. And we've got a lot of very successful sites. And then we offer backup training as well when necessary. And if you have technical problems that come up, you can submit requests for help, and people will help out. And then there's also the forums that I talked about.
Mike, a quick question in the chat just
Yeah.
related to LakeKit. Do you know if it has capabilities for there to be like member logins? So like if Eric Olson was part of the Lake Association, I would have a user ID and a login to be able to see a members only section.
Yes, there's the ability to have things be password protected. I'm not sure that it's one of the other steering committee members can probably answer this in the chat too. I'm not sure if they're able to have it individualized or if it's just one password for the organization, but we do have a number of organizations that use that feature. And in fact, if you attend the Northwest Wisconsin Lakes Conference on June 19th, online, we're using a LakeKit site for that, and we're using that feature to limit access on the day of to the page that will have the links to the Zoom rooms that the presentations will happen in, so you would be able to see what that looks like. I think I talked about all of that pretty much already. With LakeKit, this is what our homepage looks like. There's a members only section that has a bunch of information, tutorials, some videos, some written instructions. I mentioned the forum. There is the contact link. So if you click on contact us, either there or there, you can, if you're a member, you can write to us and ask questions. You can always write to me directly at my email and I pass it on to the right people. And if you're interested in getting more information, having a conversation about joining, this is where you would do it as well. In addition to things like the members only login, I think I mentioned the weather plugin. There are Facebook plugins. We can put on a news feed from the Wisconsin Lakes blog if you'd like to get lake statewide lake news. That's a feature. And Eric, if you want to put up the second poll, there's another feature that we're considering whether or not it would be worth doing some build out on. The question is, does your lake organization collect lake monitoring data that's not collected by DNR? And would you be interested in a tool to store and provide access to that through, that should say through your website. So this would not necessarily be a tool that would only be available through LakeKit, but it would be something that we would definitely make available to our LakeKit sites. So we'll leave that up for a little while. And the poll box may be in the way of some of you, but while I
An example of this data, Mike, would be like ice on and ice off date. What would be some other examples?
Yeah. The tool, as I've seen developed, allows, it also actually, it's not only data that is not collected by DNR, but it actually pulls information from the database that DNR maintains as well. So you're able to easily look up phosphorus for your lake. You can indicate specific areas of your lake.
Sure.
And it is somewhat still in development, so we don't know exactly, I guess, what it would look like.
Sure. And generally, if you want to collect even information like clarity data, SECI data, and you want to post that to the DNR, you do have to establish a monitoring site. And the DNR would say, well, we're not going to support 15 different monitoring sites on one lake. But if someone wanted to go and find like the clarity in different bays, that's something they might do locally as well. Mm-hmm. Another quick question before we close the poll out. Linda asked, is the annual cost based on the size of the website?
No, it's not. I'll have this on a slide here in a second. Actually, I can just go flip through to it. So the cost is $75 if you're a year. The year runs from April through April. $75 if you're a Wisconsin Lakes organizational member, $100 if you're not a Wisconsin Lakes organizational member. That's a flat fee. That includes all of the hosting, all of the backups and stuff, and the one domain name. Right now, just because of workload, we're limiting this to just Wisconsin organizations. But if you're interested, you're certainly welcome to check us out. Really quickly, and then I'll take a few more questions about websites in general too. This is an example of, these screenshots are from a couple of years ago, actually. If you go to LakeKit.net, there's a scrolling carousel of different site examples, so you can see what they look like. But you can see the design elements here. You've got your header, your menu, the footer you can't see because of the photo is cut off, but all your content is there, and you'd be able to click through, obviously, to the different things. This is an example of what the Wisconsin Lakes news feed would look like. But then this is Rock Lake Improvement Association, completely different look to this site, but it's still on LakeKit, and it's built with mostly the same components. So it's, you can see that the sites don't have to look the same. This is basically what the original site would look like that you start with, that can be modified to look like some of these different options. So maybe, are there any other either LakeKit or website related questions, Eric, before I go on to the next stuff?
No, no, not in the chat.
Okay.
Except maybe there's one that just came in. Can't any lake register to post collected data on SWIM's database? UW Stevens Point also has a testing program that posts chemistry data to SWIMs. Yes, and that's what I was referring to, is that with the SWIMs, they generally don't want to see you. They want to establish like where that sample was taken from. So your SECI sample is typically taken from the deep hole, and you would have to communicate with the DNR if you wanted to collect additional clarity data. So an example there would be that Lake Mendota and the chain of lakes around Madison are working with a group, nonprofit lake association, the Clean Lakes Alliance, to train hundreds of volunteers to go out just into the shallow areas near their property and record the clarity that they observe, like at the end of their pier. So they might be at 4 feet of water, and they're just trying to find out if there's an algae bloom in a particular bay or not, and track that information over time. That's not an official DNR sponsored research project. That's something the Lake Group is doing on their own, and so they have to figure out how to organize and gather all that data. And I think there's the same questions or the same data idea around ice on and ice off dates. We know those are important, but I don't think the DNR SWIM system has information for that. And Mike, there's a bunch of questions in the chat if you wanted to kind of scroll through those too. And some of them are just really quick questions about.
Yeah, there's no startup cost. It's just the annual fee. I usually don't charge you until the site is ready to go. This isn't a program that is designed to make money for Wisconsin Lakes or anyone, really. We're trying to provide as low cost and as robust a platform as we can, and also promote this idea of the importance of electronic communications. The question about PayPal, yes, there are portals that we can provide for different web commerce type outfits. So PayPal, and I think there's a couple others. And then a question of how do we know if we are Wisconsin Lakes organizational members? You would know if you pay dues to us on an annual basis. So if you pay something to Wisconsin Lakes or Wisconsin Association of Lakes, then you're an organizational member. You can also just send me an email and I can look it up really quickly to find out if you are.
Great, thanks, Mike.
All right. And the question of if you have an existing domain name, that's actually a good question in general. When you own a domain name, like we own wisconsinlakes.org, that name is really just something that when you type it in and send it out into the internets. I am not a web technical guy, so I am completely allowed to use general terms that don't really make any sense to people that actually understand what they're doing in great depth. But that right now, wisconsinlakes.org points to a certain set of coordinates in the web that have been predetermined that points towards a particular location on a server someplace that loads the pages that are on that server at that point. If I was to move to a different service, I would build my website over here on this other server, and I'd be able to just change the where wisconsinlakes.org points from over here to over here, and boom, I type in wisconsinlakes.org, and now it's going over here. So that's what happens. You do not have to keep a website on the same service. You can build a completely new, totally different site on a different service and redirect everyone to that site. And that's really how things work at LakeKit as well. All right, I'm going to go on to the rest of the stuff, which will not take quite as long, and we can come back to more questions about LakeKit and websites if we want. But I do want to get into email programs next, and talk a little bit, because we get a lot of questions about Constant Contact and MailChimp and these sort of mass emailing services, and whether they're good to use, whether it's better to just use Gmail or something like that. The reason to use them is that they're a single service that everybody that is involved with sending out emails for your organization can use them. They provide tracking services so that you're able to tell how many people open an email. If you're sending out an email newsletter and you discover that there's only 5 of 100 people that are opening that email, then you might question whether or not it's worth the time that you're spending to put that email together, or start asking questions of how can we get more people to read that. So having tracking and analytics to figure out how well your service is working is important. It allows you to build a contact database, so you're as people come and go, you can add them and move them. There's often ways to do that automatically, and in fact, at least for MailChimp, we have a plugin that allows people to sign up for a newsletter directly from your website. I'm sure that that's common on most website providers. And the other advantage is that these companies they're in the business of doing these email newsletters. And so they have an interest in being secure, and they're probably more secure than just sending out things through Gmail. They also have the ability to avoid being deemed as spam. If you just send out an email from Gmail to 1,032 people, that might be listed as spam because it's unclear where it's coming from, whether people have signed up for it. With MailChimp and Constant Contact, there's that level of relationship where they've signed up for the email, and so it's probably their email address has been verified by the service provider, and the messages travel more frequently. And then beyond email, the third form of, well, maybe I'll just stop and pose. Does anybody have any quick questions on email?
Isn't there a cost to using MailChimp or Constant Contact?
There can be. I believe both of them have some level of free service that is actually fairly robust. And so depending on what you want to do and the number of people you're sending to, you may be able to get away with using them relatively free or at low cost. Sometimes, especially if you are a lake association and so are a nonprofit organization, many of these services offer discounted packages to nonprofits as well. As a lake district, you're a governmental organization, and unfortunately, the discounts don't always fly, I guess, because the businesses believe that they can get more out of governments. But I see there's some answers from people that use MailChimp coming into the chat right now.
Mike, another question that goes back to LakeKit maybe is that says some members of the board have domain-specific email addresses. Can we keep them?
Yes, that is an issue that we've been working on. So I'm going to say a provisional yes. We've had some issues with that. There are ways actually, and sometimes it works even a little bit better. If you switch to a Google Workplace account or something like Google, there are other similar services that I think do the same thing. And you can register your domain with them. And so you're still able to use that domain name as your email address. So if you send an email to mengelson@wisconsinlakes.org, you're actually sending to a Gmail inbox. wisconsinlakes.org has just been registered as our with our Google Workplace account. And again, if you're a nonprofit, if you're an association, you can get a Google for Nonprofits account with quite a lot of functionality for no cost at all. And the other advantage of Google Workplace is it includes Google Drive, which is a place to store files offline, which can then actually be accessed through a web page. And we can get into that in a little bit as well if there's questions about that. I want to move on though at the moment to everybody's favorite topic, social media. So, you know, as I said before, we're talking about Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and the YouTube and Snapchat and TikTok. I did this presentation, a year and a half ago at the Lakes and Rivers, the first online Lakes and Rivers convention. And at the time, most people didn't know what TikTok was. I think probably more people know about it now. So it's maybe not quite as an unknown form of social media, but there are different platforms cropping up all the time, right? It's a great way to get info out really quickly. Different people use the different platforms, and there's usually a way in each platform to have some sort of discussion and feedback loop. So it's much easier, you know, to if you are familiar with Facebook, something gets posted and there's a string of comments that go along with it as users read it and make comments and interact with each other. It's a little bit, there's that capability within websites, within blog pages and things like that, but it's not usually the place that people go to have those kind of conversations. And so this is a way, social media is a way to have that kind of response and discussion. That's why it's called social. It's a social function, and it's designed that way to sort of drive conversations. The two bottom points I think are really important. One, don't ask your grandkid to do it. If you're gonna do it, someone needs to learn to do it, because the grandkid's gonna go away and do their own TikToks and Instagram pages, and they're not necessarily going to be devoted 100% of the time to making sure that the wisconsinlakes.org Facebook page is up to date and active. And the second is, if you're going to do it, I really recommend just choosing one platform and getting really good at it, figuring out whether or not it's the right one for you. Are people actually using it? You know, some lakes, that's their only thing that they use is a Facebook page. All the discussion goes through there. You know, there's a limited number of people that they're trying to reach. And so that works very well. Just the Facebook discussion group works just fine for them. Sometimes a lake will say, someone, you know, in the organization will be like, I use Facebook all the time, we should have a Facebook presence, and then wonder why they only have 10 likes. It might just be that no one in your organization uses Facebook, but you know, maybe people have really gotten into Instagram, which is more of a photo oriented thing, because they like to take and show pretty pictures of their lake, and you'll get more traction there. But you know, when you try one, try it for a while, try to get good at it, and then if it doesn't work, you can always abandon it. You can always move on to something else. These are just some quick statistics on social media that I pulled today. You know, we have 79% of Americans have a social media profile. Even 2-3 years ago, I was hearing from a lot of our members, especially in the northern part of the state where broadband's not that great, the cell networks still weren't that great. I'm hearing more and more that this is not as much of a problem, and people are beginning to adopt social media even in places that don't have great internet connections. But according to these statistics, at least, you can see that it's still definitely weighted towards the younger people are using it more than older people. And so it may not be something that you end up deciding is a great fit for your communication strategy. And then this just shows that probably not surprisingly, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook are all the most popular services right now. Twitter gets a lot of mention in the media because the media uses Twitter a lot, I think. But you know, it's 42% usage of people using social media on a daily basis use Twitter. So, and I'm interested at the end to talk about how everyone is using social media, if you do at all. And we'll get to that in just a couple of minutes. I've got just a couple more slides. So I wanted to bring this all back together now with this idea of building connectivity between these different platforms, right? So here's an example of a very complicated communication stream in its most robust form as I envision it. Again, you keep in mind what your capacity is and what your audience wants and needs, those caveats that I talked about at the beginning. So what you all end up doing does not have to look like this, but just to show in its fullest what it can and how the connectivity can work. We start with a blog post on the website. So let's say that your lake has, you've unfortunately, let's make it positive and say that you've amazingly been able to eradicate zebra mussels and Eurasian water milfoil from your lake entirely for 5 years, and you're celebrating the anniversary of that. So you write a blog post and you put it on your website. At that point, only the audiences, members of the audience that actually go to your website are going to see that blog post. You want to make that a little more seen. So you write a paragraph where you talk about that post a little bit to put in your email newsletter. You don't want to put the whole post because maybe that whole post is long, it has a lot of data in it, it has links to different things. Think about how you read email. You're not probably reading really long articles in email. If it's longer than a paragraph, you may stop looking at it. But what you do is you put a link in your email to that blog post. And now they get to that blog post on the website from your email and from the website, and you've got all of this connectivity going. Hopefully you can see my cursor. I'm circling around website and email if you can. Then you say, okay, I want to make sure that people know that we have an email newsletter and that they're reading this one. So many of these email services allow you to actually create a link to the email newsletter, to a version of it that lives on a web page someplace. You create that link and you maybe create some other social media posts. So a Facebook post that says, hey, we're zebra mussel free for 5 years. Check out the details. And boom, now this audience is finding out about this from social media, from email, from website. They read about it on the social media, they get sent to the website. Maybe the social media reinforces the story that they read but forgot about because they read it over lunch during work, and now they remember it and they go back and look at that email, and that takes them to the website. And then they find out, oh, there's also a celebratory event that's going on because you've posted that on the website. And then you can even take highlights from blog posts over the course of time, over a quarter or half the year, however often you do a print newsletter, post information about those. Again, it doesn't have to be the whole post, but it can direct people. If you want more information, go back to the website. And suddenly this audience person who maybe misses the stuff on the website initially and maybe doesn't read every one of your emails because they get 150 emails from different organizations, they see it on social media or they see it in the newsletter, but they're driven back to this hub of the website. It could be that your Facebook group is the hub and there's no website and it's just these 3 things. But the idea is that you're multiplying the chances that an individual is going to see the information you want, whether it's celebratory news about zebra mussels or a call to action that there is a really horrible ordinance that is up for passage at your county board that you want people mobilized on. So that to me is the importance and the reason why a good electronic communication strategy, to whatever level will work for you, is important. So again, if you're interested building a website or just want more information or bounce ideas about all this stuff off of me, we'll talk now. I have plenty of time. We can talk for however long you want, up till at least 5:30. Well, I'm assuming that Eric is able to stay on until 5:30. I should have asked my producer before if we had a cutoff time. But still, if you want to know what a TikTok is, probably ask a kid, because I haven't looked at TikTok. And with that, I will take any questions.
So we had a couple of discussions in the chat that have kind of been addressed, but we actually invite people to turn on their mics and ask a question out loud if you want to. That's the beauty, I guess, of meeting online this way, is that you don't have to just use the chat. So feel free.
Yeah, and if you have ideas or special ways that you're using any of these platforms that you think would be inspiring to other people on the Zoom, I'm interested to hear that as well.
Have you compared?
Hey, Mike, this is Donna Carlson over on Grindstone Lake. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you, Donna.
I noticed on your summary slide before the questions one that you had a point on converting an existing web location to LakeNet. And I was wondering if you could speak to that further, what that means, what's the advantages, how does one do it, why you should, etc.
Sure. So I don't want this to sound like a sales pitch or anything like that. So should you, that depends on whether or not the tool works well for you. There's we're really proud of LakeKit, and we think it's a great service, and it in most cases we feel like it probably saves organizations money and offers more functionality than they would get other places, because we don't have a profit motive in this. But if you have an existing site, especially if it's a WordPress site, it's actually quite easy to move sites over from an existing WordPress site to ours. WordPress has themes, and so we have a general theme that we use. So there's a little bit of manipulation that ends up needing to happen. If it's really complicated, we recommend that you find a third-party web designer to help you do it. So if you have a really highly developed site and you want it to look exactly like that when you move it over to LakeKit, you may need some additional help. We used to be able to provide help in doing that through our technical service provider, but frankly, we've gotten so busy with adding sites and making sure that things are running properly and solving some technical issues that have come up as they do with technology over the years. We unfortunately had to abandon that. We used to be able to, we charge a small extra fee to have direct help from Ken to move a complicated site over. But really, for the most part, and Karen, Larry, Stan, I think are all on. If chime in if you want. They're the people that do the training. I think most people find it's pretty easy to develop the new site in the way they want and bring stuff over. So hopefully that answered your question, Donna.
Thanks much.
I think Alexander had a question.
Yeah, this is Reed McFarland on Big Trade Lake. Have you compared the effectiveness of website and electronic communication with just straightforward print information? The reason I ask is because I've been told that the print information is much more likely to be read.
So that's a very good question and a very good point. And I don't have any specific data. what I think is that that very well may be true, and there's probably a really easy explanation for that. If print stuff doesn't get thrown away, then it sits someplace, either on an end table or sometimes, in the reading stack in the bathroom, and it's more likely to just get picked up. You're not like, sitting around and accidentally go to someone's website and read their stuff. That might be true with email. And I think in the, like, maybe a decade ago, the advice was things are starting to move away from print because electronic is cheaper and easier, and everybody gets flooded with junk mail, which is still somewhat true, but maybe not as much as it was. As mail has gotten more expensive, electronic communications have gotten easier, and so we're getting probably as much or more electronic junk as we are print junk. So if you can, but some groups just find that print is expensive. It's a lot cheaper to do things electronically than print. And so if you aren't mailing to a large number of people, or you're used to that cost as an organization, I don't necessarily recommend abandoning print entirely. But we also live in a world where I think the maxim is people need to see something 7 times before they actually remember it. And so if you can get that piece of information, even if it's just seen fleeting as they skim through an email, or as they're checking something else on the website, they see the headline of the blog post. When they then see it in print, it'll lodge in their head more fully, and they may remember it or may be unconscious, but they're more likely to go ahead and look at it. So I by no means am saying abandon print if you're using it, but when you're trying to get a message into so many people, I think it is a way to help out.
One of the factors that I think plays in here, which you haven't mentioned, is that lakeshore owners, generally speaking, are people who have second homes, who are older and solvent. And so the age disparity between electronic use and print use, I think, plays a part here.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up on this. Mike, there's some questions in the chat that you can look at while I'm giving my little spiel.
Sure.
Here at Extension Lakes, we have one long-standing outreach effort, which is the mailing out of lake tides. This started in the early 1970s, and it continues today. And of course, we had to figure out, like, well, how do we email lake tides out to people in addition to mailing it? I'm showing you just the statistics from today of how our mailing went. This is an emailing that actually happened, I think, today. So some of you might have gotten the email. It shows you how many emails we sent out, what percentage of people actually opened them, what percent of people actually opened them and clicked on something in that thing. These are somewhat depressing numbers, but it does tell you at least sort of what things look like. So when we're talking about email tracking, this is what we're getting at. We also physically mail out lake tides, and we physically mail it out to about 23,000 people. And so we have to print those many copies, and we have to pay for bulk mail, even at sort of the nonprofit rate, gets kind of expensive. And I want to say every time we do that, every time we print it and mail it out, it's about I think a $10,000 expense. So 4 times a year we go through that process. Doing the emails here, there's almost pretty much a $0 expense. And so we can see how many people clicked on and actually looked at the newsletter. When we mail it out, we just kind of hope and want to believe that people are going to pick it up and actually read it. So it's hard, right? I believe that you're right, that a lot of people pick up lake tides, they read the physical copy, they share it with other people, it sits on the coffee table or it sits at the breakfast table, and people can take it and look at it. But I also know that that's not how everybody consumes media. So especially as we're thinking about younger people and trying to bring them on board with lake stewardship challenges, I do think that email and the web is going to be a big part of our future. right now we're just in this place where we kind of have to do both.
Thank you.
I even think that print can be used as sort of a point of emphasis too, that if you haven't been doing print for a while and somebody gets something from you in the mail, that increases the impact of that print piece. So that's something to consider as well. And it really is lake dependent. And it may have something to do with, you mentioned that you don't have a lot of residents on your lake. I know that there are some lakes in southern Wisconsin that I've talked to that really use Facebook groups heavily. And maybe that has something to do with the fact that they are more year-round residents and are connected physically to the lake every single day. And so, they're thinking about it more. So that's entirely possible.
We have two websites we use, though we find that the use is declining over time because only a few people use web all the time now. However, one is for social events, so people go out there just to see what the latest electronic newsletters are from the social group, what the two printed newsletters that go out every year for the district are, and then on the district website, and also on the social website, it has all the upcoming events, pontoon parties, music on the lake, picnics, and so on. On the district side, it's the agenda that's coming up, any treatment announcements, all of the newsletters going back 40 years, all of the minutes going back 40 years, and reports and operating things. So if we don't have to be accepting requests for information, we just look it up and leave us alone. We also have Facebook. Now that may have gone berserk. We have 3,200 users on Facebook, even though there are only about 800 people in the district. So we have not only our lake, but all the surrounding lakes, all the surrounding villages and cities, a lot of county people, a lot of DNR people, a lot of Janesville people, Milwaukee, Chicago people, a few from Russia and the like. We have the Walworth County communications as the hard copy press that used to go out as online. They also share information back and forth, taking some of our stuff and we give them some of ours. We have pictures, we have storytellers. We also have a lot of ads that go on. People are selling lifts, they're selling kayaks, they're selling odds and ends, they're selling services and the like. We try to limit it, but we get at least a dozen or more of those per week on there. But overall, it's pretty good. That's the district one. And if you click on Archive Library, you'll see what all the different, you have to click in the tab and then hover over there to find what is out there. So odds and ends, how do we do our harvesting? How do we do treatments? What are our key goals for the year? What else out there? Minutes going back to 1987. Similarly with newsletters. Now, what's interesting, and the reason we don't have searches on these is because the minutes that go back 40 years are in some cases handwritten. Back then, the district officers weren't very well organized, weren't computer capable and the like. So as you can see, there are typos on there that have been corrected by hand, but some are literally just handwritten in cursive.
Sure.
So that's going to be difficult for future young people who don't know cursive.
Yeah, that's actually a point that I hadn't considered. That's true. You hit on terms of how you use Facebook, and a good point too, that one of the advantages of social media is it's really easy to share what other people are doing. So Wisconsin Lakes will share on its Facebook page, which I fully admit we don't manage as well as we could. But we share stuff that that Eric puts on the Wisconsin Lakes Partnership Facebook page. We share stuff from the DNR or from other organizations, and vice versa. So it's an easy way to get a lot of content flowing. But again, if you don't have a lot of people that are, if your audience is not a group that uses Facebook, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to spend a lot of time building something that no one is going to come use. So you do have to have a sense of what your audience is. And I don't think that, at least in terms of a Lake organization, I don't think it's probably fair to say, well, maybe they should be using Facebook. I wish they were, and we're going to work to get them to use it. Social media, especially more than any of the other forms of communication, is something that it's a very personal decision whether people adopt it or not, because of the privacy concerns that it can raise, because of the just whether or not some people just don't like to go check social media all the time, so they're just not going to do it. It just it can be a hard thing to get people to adopt if they don't come to it of themselves, and it may not be a good use of time. A website, on the other hand, again, even if it's just something that's storing a lot of static information, it is a large resource that you can get a lot of information crammed into, as you saw from Rich's sites, that people have a fairly easy time getting to. It's not, you don't have to sign up for anything to get to them. And so they can still be useful even if much of your communications still remain in print.
How can we get started on using a LakeKit site?
Sure. If you are interested, you can send me an email or fill out the contact form at lakekit.net. It'll go to me as well. Then I'll set up a time where I can just kind of go over everything with you. You get to, you have time you can take as much time as you want then to make your final decision whether you want to. But once you do, there's just a simple form to fill out that will set up an account for you. We'll assign you a volunteer trainer, and Ken will build the shell of a site, and then you'll work with your trainer. If you've already got images and content picked out right from your first training appointment, you'll be starting to work on building out your site.
We keep ours simple purposely because you don't want to keep maintaining it and spend all your time maintaining. But on the other hand, we'd like to move over eventually to LakeKit because I'm getting older.
And the nice thing about and Rich, I owe you a phone call about that actually. But the nice thing about the nice thing about LakeKit is that you don't have to do all of the back end maintenance stuff, so you can really spend your time on content. So if you have somebody, so the advantages, I guess, would be twofold. One, if you have somebody that really is interested in doing that, it's probably easier to have a really active site with a lot of posts and things like that, because it's simple to do. But if you don't, it's also easy to maintain a site without really doing a whole lot, because you can, if you set it up and let it sit there for a while, we're not going to do anything with it. We'll keep doing the backups and making sure things are working. But you're not, we don't say, oh, you have to be, you haven't, Long Lake, you haven't posted 5 posts this month, you're going to get kicked off a LakeKit or something like that. So we like to try to encourage people to be active, because we think that's a way for your site to be to get more traffic. But there's a wide range of how you can use these tools.
Another question then, do you offer kind of critique services for an organization like mine, Big Trade Lake, where we already have a website, have had for several years? Can you critique it, make suggestions?
Yeah, I'm not a web designer, and none of the rest of us on the team necessarily are. So I'm not sure that you would be getting a real technical, but I think all of us have some sense of things that work and things that don't, and we'd certainly be happy to provide some feedback on what you've got and some things that you could think about.
Wonderful.
Eric, have I missed questions in the chat? I have kept scrolling. It seemed like a lot of them had been answered.
We're mostly caught up. Someone asked about space limitations and putting PDF files on LakeKit instead of having them sit on a Google Drive somewhere. It sounds like that is an option, but there might be limits, like you don't want to put, 3 terabytes or something on there.
Right, we do have some size limits. I don't think we, correct me if I'm wrong, everybody else, but I don't think we have an exact size limit, because most sites don't get that gigantic. I actually personally don't recommend having your document storage be on your website, for the simple reason that they're not as secure as some of these other sites. So if you want to have duplicate storage on your website so that people have access to the things that they need, that's one thing. But I'm hesitant to recommend to people that that the sole electronic storage, especially if you're not also keeping paper records of stuff, that it only be on your website, just because the cloud-based services that you're going to use, the Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive or Dropbox or Box.com, Eric and I are actually looking into some other potential services that we might be able to provide through Wisconsin Lakes and through LakeKit. That the advantage of those is that there's multiple backups on many different servers. Not that that's not true with LakeKit, but they're just, the likelihood of your Google Drive getting hacked is much lower probably than a website getting attacked. That's, I think, just a fact. We employ all the security stuff that we can on LakeKit.net, so I'm very comfortable that we're secure. But in terms of actually telling you your minutes should be stored someplace, I would not recommend it be on a website. Diane, I think I answered that question then, Diane. I like the option of electronic storage. I also like as many backup options as possible. One thing that Rosina has looked at for LakeKit is that if you have your storage on, and this really doesn't have anything to do with the websites, but sort of a best practice that we have recommended to people, if you have your stuff stored in a Google Drive, say, there are internet services that you can use to automatically back up everything that's in your Google Drive to a Microsoft OneDrive. So then you have stuff stored in 2 different places, plus file cabinets at the town hall. The likelihood of all of those getting destroyed, if that happened, you probably don't need those records anymore. What else?
I'm going to disagree with the minutes, so only because if you have your minutes unavailable, people start calling you, send you letters, lawyers start giving you grief. Riparians say, well, where did you say you did this? When did you say you did this? Whereas if I just point them there, they're on their own. It's all there. It's only PDFs, and God bless you.
I love having them available and accessible through the website. I don't like having that as the only place where they're stored.
No.
Yeah. So I actually agree on that. And you're absolutely right. Larry, if you want to jump in on this, Larry did some research on how to use Google Drive to link Google Drive into your web page, so that if you click on a document, it actually takes you into the shared Google folder, and then that document is searchable. And it's searchable by things that are even in PDFs, because Google uses optical character recognition. Larry, you want to add to that at all?
There's not much to add. You did a good job.
So, Larry, I don't know if you know, Larry, if the same sort of option is available for the other cloud storages that we could plug them into web pages.
I haven't looked recently, but up until maybe 6 months ago, Google Drive was the only one that would search content in files that were scanned in. So sticking with Google Drive has that benefit that you can search for keywords even if the document was scanned in.
Yeah, I think that's a powerful thing. Someone said they'd be interested in guidance for document storage. So that's something that Erica and I are working on, and I think might even end up being a topic for a whatever Thursday at 4 becomes in the fall when we start a new season after the season finale next week.
Yep.
But it's definitely a topic, especially for lake districts, because as governmental organizations, you have open records law requirements to follow, and so it's definitely something that we want to talk about. And I think earlier I saw a call for, could we get a session that's just on best practices for website development and things like that. And we've talked as a LakeKit steering committee that we would like to do that either in the summer or again as maybe some of the fall sessions of talking about drilling down into some specifics of different features or things like that that might be good from a website development. So look for those in the future. We kind of figure that most people are going to want to take some time off, and maybe Thursdays aren't going to want to spend them on Zooms, but would rather spend them out on the lake. So we'll take some time off. Any other things that I have missed?
Well, I do want to thank folks for tuning in, both to this and any other sessions you've joined in. We will probably we're planning to follow up with an email after the whole series is done this spring too, to kind of get at what Mike is saying. We want to just kind of gauge people's interest in doing this again in the fall and find out what topics we can address. So we will be sending out a survey, so look for that. But we also just sent out a follow-up with a link to the recording and any other information that should go in a follow-up message. Mike, do you want to mention again what next week's topic is?
Yeah, you'll be able to listen to me again if you didn't find if you found my tones melodious. Next week, we're going to shift gears completely. The topic will be regulating recreation on lakes, focusing on carrying capacity. So I'll look at some of the research that's been done on carrying capacity and talk about some of the ideas around, what do we do in this current time of a lot of boats, a lot of bigger boats, and a lot of other different kinds of lake users that are having all sorts of different impacts. So we'll be talking about that.
So even if that isn't your bailiwick, if you're not concerned about it, but you know other people on maybe your lake association board or your lake district board, let them know. The sign up is through Extension Lakes, and it's just the same kind of thing. We'll run it just about an hour. Outside of that, yeah, people are saying things. So
yeah, and
thanks
thank you all. Again, if you're interested, you can get contact, fill out the contact form at lakekit.net or send me an email. You can reach us at wisconsinlakes.org as well.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice warm weekend. Stay cool. Enjoy the water. Be safe. And we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.